Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. What plant friends do, what plant friends do. My name is Darylyn, and this is Jimmy from Legends of Monstera, and this is Plant Friend Down the Street. Look who's here today, you guys. This is so exciting because I've been watching your channel for literally years.
Oh my god, I'm very flattered. I mean, there's so many channels out there. I'm super flattered.
It's crazy. It's crazy how long it's been because I feel like COVID just kind of like time warped everything.
Right.
But I looked back at some of the videos that I watched when they came out, and it's like a year and a half, close to 2 years ago.
I think my channel's been around for about 2 years. And COVID, I think COVID put a dent in a lot of things, including YouTube and making, stuff on YouTube for a lot of people. So yeah, it's been 2 years.
Yeah, I think that I definitely got like more of a creative bug during COVID as well, just having to entertain myself endlessly. Like you can only watch so much Netflix, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're here today and we have a fun little Planty Q&A for you guys.
Okay.
I have some questions that I prepared. Don't worry, there's nothing like weird. It's all fun, Planty stuff. And I had a few from other fans.
Okay.
Also, not weird, fun Planty stuff. So let's, I guess, get started. So I kind of have like 3 categories. I have like favorites, horticulture, and then like plant community and YouTube.
All right. Okay.
So I guess the first question that I had for you and a lot of other people had for you is, what's your favorite plant in your collection?
My favorite plant in my collection, hands down, is my variegated billet, philodendron billet. It's been my favorite for a very, very long time. Ever since I discovered it. I love the coloring. I love the shape. Yeah, everything about that. And then I think my close second is a philodendron variegated bipenifolium. Which is something that most people don't really talk about, but I like the shape of the leaves. It's also, like cream whitish variegation.
Yeah.
It's like the variegated, the horse head.
Yeah.
So it's just variegated.
Yeah.
And,
I'm a sucker for variegation too. I think we all are.
Yeah.
It's difficult to not be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you have more than one of those, right? You have a number of them.
Yes. I think currently though I am downsizing my collection.
Any of those variegated billetes at home.
The reason why I'm downsizing is mostly because I'm trying to do like more YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm shifting to like other hobbies. So I'll always have plants, but I'm trying to just make it more manageable at home, especially with the pest control, the watering. I want to travel more and definitely meet more plant people within the U.S. and around the world. So I'm sort of downsizing, but yeah, I'm always going to keep some.
Yeah, you have to. Do those really revert as badly as most people say?
So the variegated billet does not revert. In terms of stability, you do occasionally get leaves that are all green, but it doesn't revert the same way as like a Monstera albo, where the variegation is sort of dependent on like the stem, right?
Gotcha.
I've never had one revert, and I've never really heard of one reverting. Again, you do get some green leaves here or there.
Yeah.
The variegated bipenifolium is horrifically unstable. That plant will revert very, very easily, and it requires a lot of cutting back. Other unstable plants are like the variegated Monstera Peru. Super, super unstable. I also find that the variegated Addisonii is also very, very unstable.
Yeah.
It gets a lot of really white leaves and then a lot of really green leaves, and you kind of really have to cut things back to control them.
That's good info because variegated Addisonii is a big investment. If you guys at home are thinking about investing in a variegated Addisonii, maybe keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, the variegated Addisonii grow really quickly, but the variegation is really it's really swingy. So you get lots of like really white leaves, and then you get lots of really green leaves. Once your plant really leans towards one direction, it becomes quite hard to lean them back unless you cut it back.
Yeah.
At least that's my experience with the variegated Addisonii.
I actually just got a variegated Addisonii mint. And so I'm hoping, since it's not all white, it's going to be easier to manage it because it's more balanced.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the mint. That wasn't really something I I don't own any of the variegated mints, Addisonii, and I really haven't talked to that many people who have, so I don't know too much about that particular variegation pattern. But the traditional ones that you see around, if you're planning to buy it, I would advise making sure that the variegation is as balanced as possible as you're starting investment plan.
And by balance too, it's important that it's not just marbling, but you want to see it on both sides of the midrib, because plants that are half moons, much more chance of getting solid green leaf, solid white leaf, and going back and forth. So kind of dovetailing off of what's your favorite plant in your collection, are the variegated Billietiae your grab in a fire plant?
I don't know if I actually have any grab in a fire. If I was in a fire, I would probably grab other things.
Yeah.
Than my plants. But yes, if I had to pick one to keep in my collection, or if I had to pick a plant that's like the only plant that surrounds me, oh yeah, for sure, it'll be my variegated Billietiae.
What do you think is your most valuable plant? And this is hard because trends really do change a lot.
Yeah. I think in terms of pricing, I don't know, I think my variegated bipen, I'm not sure what the prices are for that. I have a large caramel marble.
Yeah, that's probably up there.
Yeah. I don't really collect plants that are really expensive, especially nowadays. I really just can't afford them. This hobby has gotten just insane in terms of prices. So, I don't even have a Monstera obliqua. I'm planning to whenever the prices drop at some point.
They're coming down.
Yeah.
One of my friends just traded $200 and a Millsbow for an obliqua.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's super cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, cheaper than what it used to be.
They're coming down, y'all. Hold your horses.
I think when we're, if you're talking about plant trends or plants that they're so expensive right now and are they going to come down? One thing you can think about is how easy are they to grow and propagate? Yeah. Realistically, Monstera obliqua is if you talk to people who own them, very easy and very quick growers. Or maybe not quick, but relatively fast. They're definitely not slow growers if you get them in the right conditions.
Exactly.
Variegated Addisonii, which are really, really expensive, are super quick growers, even though their variegation is unstable and they require occasionally frequent cutting back, but still very good growers. So, for those plants, it's very likely that their prices will come down because they grow so fast. Once the trend catches on, lots of people will buy them to grow them, and then they'll grow them, propagate, and it's going to be much more readily available. There are definitely some plants that they're very rare and expensive just because they're very hard to propagate. Like the Spiritus Sancti, even though I think they're getting tissue cultured, but before that, they're very, very hard to propagate. You can't just cut them by nodes.
Nope.
The same way you do, Monsteras or Pothos or something like that. So I think those types of plants, their prices are I think they're not gonna fluctuate so much. Caramel marble, variegated Billietiae, the same, similarly, it's a little bit more difficult to propagate those.
With variegated plants too, I always like to say variegation's like a fingerprint. No two variegated plants are alike, and so the value of a variegated plant, it's hard to pin it down, because if you have a really spectacular specimen, that is going to be, caramel marble is a great example. I've seen the really spectacular big plants with lots of pink, go at auction for 5 digits. And then, you have ones that are more lightly variegated that are much closer to, low quadruple digits,
right?
Which is still an extravagant amount of money for a plant, but it's a huge range.
Yeah. I think when you talk about plants with just really special variegation pattern or growth pattern, or basically anything that's really special about it, instead of just a regular plant, you go towards more of a collector's item, an art piece. When you look towards something like that, that's what the price is shifting towards. There are going to be some special specimens that are going to be insanely expensive, and you can look at that price and you're going to that is insane, and many people will agree with you.
Yeah.
But somebody, is going to or may see that particular specimen as having something really unique and special and speaks to them, and they're willing to fork out that price.
Okay, so I actually have a question for you that I think that you'll like this, because outside of YouTube, you're a doctor, right?
Right.
A physician?
Right.
What is the most questionable or specious or craziest plant-related medical claim that you've ever heard?
This is difficult. And the reason I find this question difficult is that a lot of the things that I hear or people hear or talk about that initially come off as really ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
One is that there may or may not be a rationale or some knowledge behind it that we don't understand. Like first, I always thought cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
People putting cinnamon to prevent rot or something like that was absurd to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why cinnamon and why not any other spices or something?
Right.
But apparently there is some medical, or not medical, but there is some scientific basis towards it. I think my understanding is that there's a few papers that say that cinnamon promotes the plant's immune, or the equivalent of their immune reaction or something like that. And I'm like, sure. I think the biggest question I always have to think about is, well, several big questions I have to think about. One is what's my current knowledge about this topic? Like, do I know that much about cinnamon? Do I know that much about root rot to say that's really absurd? Probably not. The other thing though is that even though it's quote unquote there's a scientific basis, is there a real life application? If I shift to medicine, what an example of this would be there's a lot of substances and medicines that have come out for babies, techniques, methodology, treatments, something that come out for babies that look really good on paper, right? They look really good on paper. It looks really good in a test tube, right? It's it does this amazing stuff in a test tube, and it does this amazing stuff in rats or animal models or monkey models or something like that. And then when you just apply it to real life, it doesn't make that big of a difference. That's the leap that I think that people don't really think about, because just because something quote unquote makes sense in your head, or it makes quote unquote scientific sense, doesn't mean when you put it into practice it's actually worth you doing. I think is there potentially something that cinnamon does for your plants? Maybe. Does it really benefit that much in the application of root rot? I always lean towards I don't really think so. I think there's other things that you can do.
Yeah. So I always hear about cinnamon as a deterrent for fungus gnats in addition, or as an agent to help cuttings callus over faster.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of I actually haven't heard about. I think I've heard about the fungus gnats one. I haven't heard about the speedy callus thing. Do you really need cinnamon? Can you just put it in air longer to make it callus faster? So so I think these are some of the things that I'm all about trying to make things really basic and simple.
Yeah.
I always stress do you really need to do that? Sometimes the answer is yes, and I just don't know enough about it to be convinced. But I think as a doctor, I think what I bring to the table is a lot of skepticism. When someone tells me that they need to buy this specific fertilizer or this specific product, right? All the products that are quote unquote hot and needed or necessary, I'm always super, super skeptical about it until I meet someone, when I'm talking to someone and they're like, no, Jimmy, you're totally wrong, right? This thing is, you don't understand. Here's what happened. And I let the people who are more experienced than me or more knowledgeable than me kind of tell me that it is worth the time and effort and money for a lot of people.
That's the tough thing though when you're taking plant advice from people, because you can't really run a double-blind clinical trial style experiment in your house for the most part. So I don't know. I just kind of tell people if you find something that works in your conditions, just go with it, run with it, because you never really know what factor it is that's making the difference. But if you change one thing, it could all go to hell, and then it's you don't know where you went wrong, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that I also notice that people get stuck on is that they're always trying to be better, which I encourage, right? Everyone encourages, you want to try to be better. But when it comes to planting, right, sometimes what you're doing right now is the most optimal and the most practical way to do things in your environment.
Right.
Right? And everyone's oh, what can I do to make it grow faster? Sometimes you're doing pretty good already, right?
Yeah.
And trying to take that extra step forward, like you alluded to, has risks, right? Like it can, instead of, as you're trying to take a step forward, you may realistically be, taking a step or a few steps back. Why do we overwater, right? Initially,
yes.
Wasn't it because you're like, oh, I want it to grow faster or better, right? Like we're all like, oh, we're afraid that the plant's going to dry up. So you overwater with the intention, right? That you're trying to make your plant grow better and faster. But, too much of a good thing is not always good. If you're getting new leaves, like once a month or something, like just whatever periodically, your leaves are great. Your plant is doing fine. Sometimes that's really enough. And you don't need to put more energy or more time or more money. I don't know. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, the point of a budget is so good though too, because this hobby, I made a point about this in I think like the first video I ever did, that like, oh, you get into the hobby thinking, oh, what a fun, wholesome, inexpensive hobby. And I mean, there's really no ceiling to how much money you can spend in this hobby.
I think when you're on social media, there is a lot of people either with financial investment in it or not that are always like promoting these products, right? It's kind of like, I remember when Newt was a big thing. I don't know if that's a big thing anymore. I remember when cinnamon was a big thing. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. Apparently it is. Was it liquid dirt? I mean, there's like, there's products that like come in and then they phase out.
Liquid Dirt's definitely having a moment right now. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I use Liquid Dirt and I like it. Yeah. Because if you actually like go in and you look at all of the ingredients, I mean, it's basically like just every single organic fertilizer all mixed into one.
Yeah, but if you think about large scale growers or very experienced growers, right? You see people who have been collecting plants for decades, right? Before Newt, right? Before Liquid Dirt, before ever, I mean, they didn't. I'm not sure what they used, right? Maybe they used, I don't even know, right?
Like compost.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's been people who, in our country who have been growing things for decades with very minimal products, right? Or different products, and then also you see growers from other countries who may not have access to whatever products that we have here, and they're still growing plants, right? So that really shows you that, like, do you really need any of these products? The answer to that likely is no. And then are these products helpful? They're probably helpful to some people to know. And if you can afford it and you want to try it, that's great. But I don't think that anyone should feel pressured to do it. And if you can't afford it, then don't think that you're a bad parent. I mean, what do I use? I use Miracle Grow, that blue cheap powder stuff.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. It's like the cheapest thing on Amazon.
If it works,
right? And that's what I use, and like systemic pesticides, and then I also use, I think, like some rooting hormone. Yeah. Which again, I don't know if that works or not. I just have a little bottle or some powder, in a bottle. And so I use that, but that's it. Would Liquid Dirt help me? Probably, but I'm fine with how my plants are.
If it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. Right. Yeah. I guess this kind of ties well into what's the best and worst plant advice you've ever been given?
The best plant advice was probably to water less.
Yeah.
Anything that requires watering less. Not using soil or using as little soil as you can, probably very, very good plant advice.
Especially for aeroids and orchids and things that are epiphytic, that are not growing in what we think of as like topsoil in like North America and Europe. That's good.
I honestly, I think that when I got into planting and, throughout my plant journey, every time I went to a box store and they were out of potting soil and I had to get bark or perlite or basically anything else, my plants would have been much happier. I would have lost less plants. So I think that, watering less, using more well-draining soil, I think it's probably good plant advice. Worst plant advice. I don't think I've ever had anything really outrageous I would say that's worst plant advice. One is that I would like to think that everyone's giving advice based on their experience and with good intentions. A lot of advice works for somebody somewhere. It may not be you, right?
Right.
Like a grower in the tropics can give you advice, that is going to be horrible for you if you live in, I don't know, the middle of a desert or something like that, right? And also vice versa. So I think a lot of advice works for somebody somewhere. So probably the worst advice is the one that comes from people who say like, my way is the only way. I would say that's the worst one. Okay, so not along that note, but not necessarily a bad advice. I remember when, like a year or two ago, when soil compositions were like much more of a topic. I think nowadays we have a lot more information about that, a lot more growers with much more experience with their potting mixes. Mm-hmm. But before, I remember like there were videos and there were advices about soil compositions with like 20 ingredients or some ridiculousness. Mm-hmm. And yes, I still think it's just ridiculous, because I think that I feel like for the practical, prudent, economical planter, that doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, I don't know. I'm more of a less is more kind of guy, and I would caution anyone who's taking advice from people who are saying this is the only way to do something.
Or if you see things that say like guaranteed to solve this problem, like that's always a red flag. Nothing's ever guaranteed.
I haven't run into that yet.
Oh, you see them all the time on like YouTube video care advice, like get 100% guaranteed to get rid of fungus gnats, or 100% guaranteed to increase variegation, or all sorts of stuff.
I need to watch those videos. Yeah, I'm still dealing with. Am I dealing with fungus gnats? No, I think fungus gnats I have under control. Spider mites are sort of a constant thing for me.
That's so funny. I've never had spider mites.
Okay,
but I've had thrips, and those are the worst.
You're gonna run into spider mites eventually. Everyone does.
Yeah, that's what everyone keeps telling me, and I don't know. Like I just never have.
Yeah, you just gotta keep wishing that period prolongs, But I think it's just inevitable. It's inevitable.
That's actually not true. I did get a plant in the mail recently that had spider mites, but I nipped that in the bud real quick, because not in this house. Not in this house.
That's what I said too.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure my time is coming, but so far, I mean, and I have a lot of plants in this house that spider mites are probably like to chomp down on. Like, you look around this room, and it's like that big melanochrysum over there is just asking for it. Speaking of pests, what would you say is your most devastating plant fail?
I mean, it's really just like using a lot of potting soil with monsteras. I would say that's like a big plant fail, especially like now when I think about it. Like monstera is really, they can be so dry. Like I think if you look at some, various plants, whatever you find, or I mean, I recently visited Daryl in NorCal, and he had these large monsteras that were super dry. And when I did the video, the comments were like, "Why don't you water your plants?"
Oh my god!
Right? And it was just like they were like their leaves were crinkled, they were dry. Okay, like I mean, there's no doubt about it. But they were still alive, and if anything, it shows us that like just keep your plants dry, right? Just like water less, use more well-drained soil. Monsteras do not die from being just like way too dry. When they get really dry, and I've learned this from experience because I keep my plants really dry. What happens is that they start just growing aerial roots way more, and trying to just find any bit of moisture that they can. So I think I would say that's my biggest plant fail. I also killed an obliqua once because I thought it needed way more humidity than it did, and then it melted. That was rough.
No.
Yeah, I mean, but for every plant fail, you'll learn something, and hopefully you'll have more plant successes.
Right? Yeah, my Anthurium splendidum keeps melting, so I'm right.
It's painful.
It's painful, yeah. It's still alive, but the leaves just keep melting. It's sad. Who would you say are your planty idols?
I don't know.
You could just say Enid, and we can move on.
First of all, I admire anyone who dares to be on camera.
Yeah.
Like I think that's like the main focus of my YouTube channel now, is to interview people. And a lot of people, including myself, I'm very introverted. I'm actually very, very camera shy. So anyone who is, able and willing to just like put on, be on camera and be awkward or whatever, I admire that. Like I admire that a lot. Regardless of your collection, regardless of your plant knowledge, just people willing to be on camera and sharing what they know, sharing their collection, big or small, sharing their passion and energy and positivity with, just like putting it out there into the world. I admire that a lot. More than, the people with the most ginormous collections out there, the people with the most plant knowledge, or the ones who can identify like a bazillion plants or something. I would say that.
That's a very nice answer. Are there any plants or genuses that you're afraid to try?
Yes, I don't do begonias.
Me neither.
So I don't have any plant enclosure at my place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have a greenhouse set up. I don't have any IKEA cabinets. So I think begonias are something I'm like, nope, I just don't have enough humidity for you guys. Orchids I haven't tried, but I sort of want to.
Orchids are super easy.
Yeah. So I actually think that begonias and orchids are probably going to be the next hot plant things.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is that orchids traditionally have been very affordable, and I still think that they are very affordable, even like the rare ones, relative to the craziness we're seeing with aroids. And I think traditionally orchids, for people who don't have orchids, including myself, have been very intimidating. But now that I feel that people are more comfortable with aroids and the epiphytic, growth patterns of some of these species, I think that people are going to be more comfortable going to orchids and realizing, like you said, that orchids should technically be really, really easy.
I actually started with orchids about like 10 years ago. I had tons of them, and the secret, really, all orchids want is they just want consistency and just,
Well, if anything, I think a lot of people as they got into their plant journeys, they're learning about consistency. And then I think that with the rise of these plant enclosures, IKEA or otherwise, a lot more people have these environments where they can do begonias or pipers. Right?
Yeah.
That traditionally need a lot of humidity. So I think it's going to be very interesting, the plants that we're going to see pop up now that everyone has or is familiar with high humidity microenvironments in their place.
Yeah, and once you get your like self-sustaining bioactive enclosure kind of going, they're very set it and forget it. So I think you're probably onto something there. Yeah.
I'm not going to do it, but I will visit people who do.
I'm not opposed to it. I just don't have a ton of space. There's actually already there's a big kind of community that overlaps plants and reptiles, where they have the bioactive enclosures where they grow things like, the epiphytic like bromeliads and orchids and things like that. And then they have it all seamlessly together with frogs or lizards or whatever. And it's really cool.
Oh yeah, no, there's a huge community out there. Huge. Even I think they were more established than the aroid community before the aroid trend. I think it'll be very interesting. It'll be a really fun journey for a lot of people, but it does require some time and effort and before things like stabilize.
And the other thing too is once you bring pets into the equation, like the stakes go up. Like they go up a lot more, because if you screw up your pH with a plant, it's like, oh, that's a shame. I'll take some cuttings. Right. Like you screw up your pH with a frog.
Yeah, and for me, it's space and time. Like YouTube and traveling around and visiting people. It's taking a lot of my time and also my plant time and also my plant energy. I'm not one of those people who wants to think or talk about and deal with plants like 24/7. Plants is like a hobby and an interest to me. So meeting plant people and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing it, that's been really fulfilling and rewarding for my life as well as the plantiness.
So you mentioned travel. That actually brings us to the number one question I was getting from other fans is, how do you manage your plants with your travel schedule? And also, you have a very demanding job as well. How have you optimized your collection so that the plants are a little bit more self-sufficient so that you can leave and come back to plants that are alive?
So I technically only look at my plants and water my plants once every 2 weeks.
Oh, nice.
So I can go 14 to 16 days without having to do anything for my plants at all.
Wow.
That's not because I'm like every 14 or 16 days I do something miraculous to my plants. I don't have the greenest thumb at all. I think that it's about finding a balance between what I can do and it's manageable for me in my life with plants and keeping them okay, right? Like, I think a lot of them are happy. At least I would like to think that a lot of them are happy. But are they like living their best tropical lives? They're not. My place has like no augmented humidity. Again, they get watered once every 2 weeks, so they're not living their best lives. But they're still alive, and they're still there for me to enjoy. And for me, it's not like a burden to me. Like I don't have to rush home to water. I don't have to really think about things all too much. So it just became the most manageable way for me to do things, and I'm okay with it. Someone came by and were like, Jimmy, you could be better, and I'm like, yeah, the plants could be better, but that's just not going to be. It's just not going to be practical. I mean, I feel like the same way is for anyone who has like a busy career or family or other hobbies, or they travel a lot. I think people just kind of have to find a balance that is manageable for them and not compare themselves to some other people who have either more time or dedication or resources or something.
Yeah, or help. If your partner or you have friends that maybe live down the street, neighbors that can come and plant it for you. Not everybody has that. But correct me if I'm wrong, you have a lot of big mature plants, right?
Well, it depends.
But they're not like babies. They're not. You don't have a lot of like seedlings or.
No.
Yeah.
I do not. I don't play the seedling game. I think they may require a little bit more time or effort or so.
Oh, seedlings are like really fickle.
Okay. Yeah.
You look at them wrong and they just go.
Yeah, I don't. I would say a lot of the smaller cuttings or whatever, they're in water. I water propagate my plants. And I really just leave them there months at a time, like for months. And I just kind of, top whatever container they're in with water every 2 weeks or so whenever I'm doing my thing. I just leave them there for a very, very long time. And by the time I even think about moving them, they usually have like so many roots that I just plop them in soil or perlite mostly. And I just treat them, at that point, like the rest of my other plants. I do have plants die, that's like for sure. I just kind of take those as, it is what it is, like I want to be like the plants to be a good part of my life instead of like me having to change a lot of my life for the plants.
Yeah, it's better not to force it. Yeah. What is the most jaw-dropping plant that you've seen in your travels in person? There's probably a lot to choose from.
So, we're in California.
Yeah.
So we usually don't have big plants.
Right.
So I think usually it's like big, massive specimens of things that I see people have or something, and I'm just like, whoa, right? And I think something that people don't realize unless they do see a lot of plants is that the difference between like a baby plant and a really large, mature, giant plant, it isn't just size, right? It isn't like I take this cup and I magnify it,
right?
And it's still like the same cup, only bigger, right? It's really not that. It's that like the leaves change, the forms change, like it turns into something that you just did not imagine because you just haven't seen it before, either in person or even on pictures. So I think that the most impressive plants have just been like these really large versions of plants that I'm just like, whoa, that's like, I never imagined that plant to be something like that. And I think those are the most fun. In California, when I'm visiting people in California, it is especially fun when I find someone with a big specimen of something in their home. I think that's always fun. Yeah, I think when people ask that question, it's it's like you expect me to say like Spiritus Sancti or something, which is fine. It's always fun to see a Spiritus Sancti or touch one, but yeah, I don't know. I think I'm pretty authentic on my videos when something's like really shocking to me.
Yeah, for sure.
I spend a lot of time oohing and ahhing over it, and sometimes it could be a really simple plant, or it could be like a color that's a little different, or a shape that is different, or the way like it does something or another on a quote unquote common plant can be very intriguing and very satisfying.
That's a good answer. What is something about doing YouTube that nobody tells you before you start?
If I knew what YouTube was going to be like before I started, there's probably a 50% chance I would never have started.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
YouTube for me was, and it still is, it's like a lot of effort.
Yeah.
I think that's something that people don't tell you about. If you're not familiar with like lighting or angles, or if you don't take a lot of pictures yourself, there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of editing that kind of goes in. I think that if I had to do YouTube as a career or as a job or as my main income, I wouldn't do it. It would just be too miserable to do it. For me, it's good because it's fun, because I like, meeting and talking to people, and then when I edit, I just edit in my free time, and then when I'm done, I'm just like done with it. So the editing isn't that big of a deal, but it's like a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of like learning curve, and I'm quite introverted. I'm really like, I hate being in front of the camera. So that's really like an effort, and I'm not sure if people understand that. Maybe introverts do. Like, if you're introverted and you're like at the party and you kind of have to do a speech, or you kind of have to like be on the spotlight or something like that, it's very tiring. So some of the videos, especially like me sitting and talking in front of the camera, it can be very, very exhausting. I think that answers the question, right? The answer is like people don't know. But I also think that what also people don't know about starting YouTube is that it can be incredibly rewarding. Like, I'm not even talking about financial reward, because I'm not even there yet. Like, the financials suck, guys, for YouTube. But I think the reward is you're able to put yourself out there, which can be a terrifying and uncomfortable, but overall can be a very fulfilling experience. I think like when I look back in my life, I'm actually very proud that I started YouTube. Even though it's just like a small channel about plants or something, like I can be very proud that I was uncomfortable, or I dared to share a part of myself with the world, I guess, or whoever wants to watch or accidentally clicks on the thumbnail, I think that part, that rewarding part and that fulfilling part is understated. I don't think that people talk too much about it, but I think that's something that people should know.
Yeah. No, that's a really good introspective answer. I mean, for me, it's the cleaning. No one tells you before you start YouTube how much cleaning you have to do, because you can't be showing people like your house looking filthy.
Right. So you do it right? Like, you do it right. So if you look up like YouTube tutorials, what they tell you is like, okay, make sure like your lighting's right, make sure you're the right directions, make sure your background's clean. Like try to make things as crisp and professional as you can. So you're doing it right. I just kind of like turn on the camera, but everyone's different, right? Like for me, it's just on days when I have to like film myself, especially, it's all, even now, like 2 years in or something, I still have to like take a couple deep breaths, and I'm just like, okay, like I can do this, and I just got to do it. Do it.
You just kind of got to just get on with it. So at the end of the day, the thing about YouTube that would be kind of different than being on a TV show or in a movie is that you have control over everything. So at the end of the day, if you shoot footage and you hate it, you don't have to post it.
Right.
Which is nice. I think that for a lot of introverts, if you're trying to get into some sort of creative form of media, YouTube's a good place to start, because you have full control over what people see. You can scrap ideas, you can redo things, you can go at your own pace, which is really nice.
Yeah, there is a very big creative component. I mean, it can really be as creative as you want to make it.
Yeah, there's no ceiling on how far you can take it, for sure. Okay, so this is like kind of not the smoothest transition, but what would you say your plant white whale is? Like the plant that you most desire to add to your collection that you've never been able to acquire?
Oh, I think the next thing I kind of want would be like the philodendron ilsamani.
Yeah, the ilsamani is for sure mine.
Yeah, I think that's something that I would like to add to my collection. I would probably like to add an obliqua Peru at some point, and then the Philodendron polypoides, I really like.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's a like very nice thin leaf one, polypoides.
Oh, cool.
And probably like a narrow tortum. None of these are, besides, there's a few that the Ilsamanii is really very expensive. The narrow form tortum.
Yeah. I think I've seen those. They're cool.
Mm-hmm.
They look very like spindly, like almost like a Tim Burton plant vibe.
The polypoides is very similar to that as well.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I hope you find those.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think all those they're easily available if I had the energy to look for them.
Okay, so I think we can probably wrap it up with one last question, and I'm gonna go ahead and just ask you, if you could go back to the very beginning of your plant journey,
okay,
what would you do differently?
Not buy potting soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just no potting soil ever.
Yeah. I think if potting soil did not exist or was always on shortage or sold out, I would have had a much smoother planting journey. Yeah, I think that would be it. I was like, well, for YouTube, I would probably try to interview more people, but then I can just do that now.
Yeah, it's important to pace yourself too.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for answering all of my prying, cloying questions. This has been really fun. I hope that you had fun and it wasn't too horrible and torturous for you.
Oh no, these are very easy questions.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming on. Thank you for chilling with both of us today. And I hope to see you guys on this channel again really soon. Bye.